It was a special day. On April 12, 1943, Robert Alan Durst was born in the heart of New York City, the first child and eldest of 4 children in a family that embodied the power of the city's construction world. His paternal grandfather, Joseph, who emigrated from Poland in 1902, realized the American dream. He soared from scratch to the heights of running an empire of commercial and residential buildings in Manhattan. Robert, affectionately called Bobby by his friends, spent his childhood surrounded by luxury, amid the gentrified streets of the affluent suburb of Winchester County. But in this golden cage, Robert was not as smooth and shiny as those around him. From a young age, he was the most troubled child in the family, a rebel and an outsider, constantly quarreling with his younger brother Douglas, who later took over the family business, seemingly destined for success in the real estate world. Robert displayed social awkwardness, mumbling to himself, swearing noisily in public, urinating in office trash cans. In other situations, he could be kind and generous to the point of impossibility, gave away thousands of dollars to friends, attended the ballet, organized parties in the famous 70s disco club Studio 54 and other popular places in Manhattan. A master of disguises and aliases, he carried around a collection of wigs and masks, posing as fictitious individuals, often using the names of classmates from high school. He once lied about having 2 doctorates. Bob is incapable of telling the truth, his brother Douglas Durst told the New York Times in a 2015 interview. He's a real psychopath, devoid of emotion. Robert Durst's story is a drama about a contradictory personality, an enigmatic combination of genius and destructiveness. Bobby's life journey was marred by tragedy. At the age of 7, he claimed to have witnessed his mother's suicide from the roof of the family mansion. None of the kids saw it, his brother Douglas Durst told the New York Times, accusing Robert of lying. However, Robert himself insisted on the truthfulness of his version of events, claiming that this horror left an indelible mark on his psyche. This whole story is complemented by another layer, a diagnosis of personality disorder and possibly schizophrenia, made at the age of 10. Robert was targeted by law enforcement because of his controversial behaviors, from inappropriate jokes to urinating in office trash cans. However, he was also a gifted individual with an unusual view of the world. His eccentric personality found hundreds of associates and fans on social media, where he created his own, unique lifestyle. Robert Durst is a mysterious figure that still stirs minds. Loser or genius? Mentally ill or just an extraordinarily talented man? The answer to this question will probably remain a mystery for the rest of his life. Robert Durst's story becomes even more confusing and intriguing with each new fact. His life is a contradiction, a combination of unusual giftedness and strange behavior that did not always lend itself to the classification of the time. The diagnosis of personality disorder made in his childhood was based on diagnostic methods that are now considered outdated. The hypothesis of Asperger's syndrome becomes relevant given the unusual nature of Robert's behavior, his difficulties with communication, and desire for isolation. It is important to note that in the 1960s, understanding of the autism spectrum was significantly limited and diagnoses were poorly made. Despite this, the court found Robert to be able-bodied, another factor that adds to the mystery of his story. In 1965, Durst earned a degree in economics from Lehigh University, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. He then enrolled at the University of California, Los Angeles for graduate school. Earning a degree in economics and going to graduate school are symbols of Robert's giftedness and desire to achieve success in life. Meeting Susan Berman adds another layer to the already tangled story of Bobby Durst's life. Their immediate and strong emotional connection, despite tragic events in their past, is another mystery. They both experienced the loss of their parents. Susan's mother committed suicide, and her father died under unclear circumstances. This shared suffering may have been the catalyst for a deep bond between them. Perhaps they saw in each other's eyes a reflection of their own grief, an understanding, and empathy for the pain of loss. Together with Bobby, Susan sought comfort, love, and support. Their relationship, though platonic according to the media, lasted for many years, emphasizing the depth of their emotional bond that was intertwined with the shared tragic events in their lives. What is interesting is that Bobby and Susan's relationship was purely platonic, as the media claimed. This is another clear illustration of how difficult it was to separate the truth from the lies in Durst's story. The fact that Susan Berman defended Robert after being accused of murdering his wife confirms the depth of their emotional bond and her faith in him despite all the scandals and accusations. Bobby Durst's story is a mysterious combination of tragic events, an unusual personality, and a tangled relationship that is still a source of controversy and public interest. The first casualty associated with Durst's name was his informal spokesman. As a young man, Durst's behavior often seemed merely impulsive and eccentric. For example, after 2 dates, he invited Kathleen McCormack, a neighbor from a middle-class Irish Catholic family who lived in one of the homes owned by the Durst family, to move with him to Vermouth, where he opened a health food store. They lived modestly, settled in a hippie neighborhood, and drove a Volkswagen Beetle. The return to the family business didn't go well. Poorly suited for the job and increasingly estranged from his brothers, sisters, and father, that's when it was noticed that he was urinating directly into the office trash cans. Robert eventually negotiated his way out of the family foundation, receiving $65 million for doing so. The marriage was also crumbling. This fragment is in stark contrast to the previous ones, showing Bobby Durst's changing personality and behavior. His inability to adapt to life in the family business, combined with eccentric actions, urinating in trash cans, undermines his image as a gifted and charismatic man. The departure from his family and the receipt of a large sum of money were the starting points for even more turbulent events in the life of Bobby Durst, and the collapsed marriage was the sad consequence of this period. Just after Christmas 1981, Kathleen, who was completing her hygienist, dental assistant training, was admitted to a New York City hospital. According to hospital records, the injuries, she said, were inflicted by her husband. According to her family, Robert had previously forced her to have an abortion. A month after her injuries were recorded, she disappeared, and her body was never found. Durst, who reported his wife's disappearance to police 5 days later, claimed he drove her from her South Salem home to the Catton station and saw her board a train bound for Manhattan, where she had medical school classes the next day. He said he returned, drank with neighbors, and later contacted his wife by phone. His behavior became increasingly disturbing, from physical abuse to the fact that he was covering up her disappearance. Kathleen disappeared from their penthouse on Riverside Drive in Manhattan on January 2, 1982. Telephone records showed no calls from the South Salem home to their penthouse that night. Durst claimed he called from a payphone while walking his dog, but the nearest payphone was several miles away, and the night was rainy and cold. Neighbors could not recall him drinking with them that night. In 1973, Durst divorced his first wife, claiming she had left him. 10 years later, amid a new investigation into Kathleen's disappearance, Durst married businesswoman Debris Lee Sheraton, who managed his finances and became heiress to his fortune. Once again, there is a sense of hidden facts and manipulation on Robert Durst's part. His marriage to Debris Lee Sheraton, especially in light of his financial and legal assistance, gives the impression that he is seeking to launder his name and protect himself from accusations. The marriage was considered a sham. They rarely lived together. The next tragedy occurred in 2000. Susan Berman was found in her home with a gunshot wound to the head. Neighbors claimed that she never let strangers into her home. Shortly afterward, authorities in Winchester County, NY, reopened an investigation into the failed disappearance case of Durst's first wife. According to court records, Los Angeles prosecutors claimed that Durst confessed to killing his first wife to Berman and asked her to help him cover up the crime. Prosecutors argued that he killed Berman because she decided to tell investigators everything. During the trial, Nick Chavin, a longtime friend of Durst's, testified that during a conversation on the street in New York City in 2014, the man confessed, "That was the situation. It was her or me. I had no choice." The prosecutor's office called 80 witnesses and presented nearly 300 exhibits, but the main evidence against himself was provided by the defendant himself, but more on that later. It is a direct and frank admission of guilt in the murder of his first wife. It demonstrates ruthlessness and cold-bloodedness and supports the theory of eliminating potential threats. In 2001, 71-year-old Morris Black, a former merchant seaman, was found dead in Galveston, Texas. His roommate turned out to be none other than Robert Durst. Durst had been hiding his real identity by living under the name of a woman. One night, there was an argument between the two men that escalated into a conflict. During the fight, Durst pulled out a .22 caliber revolver. The men grappled with the weapon, falling to the floor. According to Durst, the gun went off accidentally and the bullet struck Mr. Black in the face. Durst made a shocking confession. Not only did he kill Black, but he dismembered the victim's body, throwing the body parts into the bay. Arrested on murder charges, Durst refused bail and fled. Police began a 45-day manhunt. Finally, he was caught at a Pennsylvania supermarket for stealing a chicken sandwich. When police searched Durst's rental car, they found 2 handguns, $37,000 in cash, pot, and Black's driver's license. At trial in 2003, Durst claimed he acted in self-defense and disposed of the body out of panic, fearing no one would believe his story. Thanks to skillful lawyering, he was acquitted. In 2015, Andrew Jarecki, the director of the feature film about Robert Durst, directed a 6-part documentary series for the HBO channel. The event was surprising, as Durst had never collaborated with journalists or filmmakers. What remains unclear are his reasons for agreeing to be filmed and granting a total of 20 hours of interviews in which he expressed his admiration for Jarecki's work. In the final interview, Jarecki handed Durst 2 envelopes. One contained Durst's letter to Berman from 1999, and the second contained a note to the LAPD in which an anonymous person had given detectives the location of Berman's body. A handwriting expert stated that both letters were written by the same person. Both letters contain the same spelling mistake, misspelling the word Beverly Hills. This would seem to be irrefutable proof that Durst had taken the life of Citizen Berman. After the interview, a shaken Durst headed for the bathroom, unaware that his wireless microphone was still on. A casual confession off-screen resulted in him uttering incoherent sentences, ending with, "What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." Durst's lawyers later acknowledged that he had written the corpse note, but insisted that it only proved his knowledge of the crime, not that he had committed it. On the other hand, they claimed that the tape shown in the movie had been remounted. "I killed them all" was inserted at the very end, the producer admitted, to end the series on a dramatic note. The production team had reported a confession to the police for the crime even before the last episode was released. Fearing that Durst might flee the country, agents arrested him hours before airtime. He was living in New Orleans under a different name and was held for extradition to Los Angeles. Louisiana police charged him with unlawful possession of a weapon, and then extradition proceedings to another state began. Pandemonium delayed the story's finale. A Los Angeles Superior Court jury found Durst guilty of a first-degree felony. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Shortly thereafter, he was hospitalized after testing positive for COVID-19. Before his death, he underwent several major surgeries, as if confirming the rightness of those who believe in karma. However, paradoxically, the only criminal record of the millionaire, who was accused of the murders of 3 people, can also be removed. Under California state law, because Durst's appeal was never heard, the state's appellate courts can dismiss it, but at the same time order the trial court to vacate the conviction. In any case, the family of his first missing wife, Kathleen McCormack, never got justice, and after 40 years, Durst did not live to see the trial on the main charge of his life. Durst went into cardiac arrest in the hospital, and resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. Durst's story is a tragedy full of confusing circumstances and injustice. His culpability for the murders remains controversial, and his death has prevented a definitive legal record of what really happened. The families of the victims were left with unanswered questions, and Durst himself passed away without waiting for a fair trial. The paradox is that the possible reversal of the verdict, due to the technicalities of the law, comes no closer to the truth of his guilt or innocence.